Hey guys, welcome to That Pedal Show. Dan here.
Mick here, and I'm Dave. Hello.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
So, for all of you that don't know, shame on you. But however, this is Dave Gregory. Dave, while I was growing up, was my... there we go, mega honk. Dave was, being a kid and growing up in Brisbane, and I first heard XTC, and I heard this amazing guitar playing, and then that was sort of me done. I had my... What would you call... your
epiphany.
From listening to you play.
Goodness.
There you go. Heavens to Betsy.
Yeah.
So, and one of the things that you're always associated with is 12-string guitars. So I thought we'd have a look at some of those, and then also have a look at some of the XTC things and guitars that we used in that period. But
Sure.
Shall we start with the guitar that you're playing?
Yeah, well, obviously as a kid growing up, I was a huge Beatle fan. I was 11 years old when when Beatlemania struck this country and the world, in fact. And one of the great things one of the many new sounds that they brought was the sound of the 12-string guitar, even though at that age I didn't know what it was. I remember flipping the 45 of Can't Buy Me Love over and hearing this riff that sort of went... I didn't know what it was. It was a brand new sound. I thought it sounded like a keyboard. It can't be a guitar. The guitars don't make a noise like that. And it was one of these, a Rickenbacker 12-string, the first one that Rickenbacker had sort of made and given to George Harrison when the Beatles went to America in February of 1964. And of course, the guitar was put straight to use on the following record. And that's where I first heard it. And I swore to myself at that time, I must find the source of that sound because I'm in love with it.
Right.
And it took me, years of, that's before I even picked up a guitar and didn't even know which end to blow into. So, as time went by, it was always there. Then the Byrds arrived the following year.
Right.
Mr. Tambourine Man, which just turned everybody's heads around. And it just became part of modern pop music, and I just wanted to find it. And anyway, time went by, got my first electric guitar, learnt some basic chords. Then Jimi Hendrix arrived, and Eric Clapton arrived, and Jeff Beck, none of whom played 12-string guitar. So I kind of got sidelined for a few years. It was always there, At some point, I will find a Rickenbacker 12-string guitar.
Because that sound had resonated so strongly with you.
Very much so. Anyway, this spin forward years and years. I joined this amazing band, XTC, from my hometown, who had a record deal. They actually had a record deal, and someone prepared to put money behind them to make records. And this was my dream, to be in a band that... was actually signed by a record company, and to make a living as a musician was just, best thing there could be. So anyway, we made 2 albums, guitar, bass and drums, 2 guitars, bass and drums. And after we'd done the second of those 2 albums, Black Sea.
So the first one was
Drums and Wires.
Yeah, Drums and Wires.
And the second one, as I say, Black Sea. And after which I felt the need to think broader about, taking the guitar, using more keyboards, expanding the sounds of the guitars, because I figured there was only so far you could go with just that basic lineup.
Sure.
Certainly with the songs that were coming, that Andy and Colin were writing. And I thought, it's time I finally went looking for that elusive Rickenbacker guitar. And the first one I found was in the summer of 1981. I found myself with some money to spend. I always wanted the George Harrison guitar, which was similar to this, and I couldn't find one for love nor money. George's guitar was, as I later discovered, stereo wired, had 2 jack sockets, a mono and a stereo, and it had these lovely pearl triangular inlays and a sort of cat's eye shaped sound hole.
Right. Yeah.
And I loved that look, together with the plastic bindings on the top and the back. But you never saw them, you just didn't see them anywhere.
Was George's sunburst or was it black?
It was exactly the same as
Was
this.
it? It was sunburst, yeah.
Except for all the deluxe appointments. It was exactly the same body shell and neck and everything, but it had the extra wiring. Same type of knobs. And the same with these toaster, what they call toaster top pickups now, which everybody loves the sound of. And basically defines the sound of that chiming Rickenbacker thing that we all know and love so well. So anyway, as I was saying, looked for years for one like George's, couldn't find one anywhere. So I thought, well, I'm just going to have to see if I can find a new one that's similar. And to that end, if I can just pull this out. This was the first Rickenbacker I owned. That I bought second-hand in the summer of 1981. And I brought along to rehearsals because we were rehearsing songs for a new album which would become English Settlement, which did us quite a lot of favours sales-wise. We actually had a hit single on it, and that was Senses Working Overtime. And this guitar played a big part in creating the sound of that record, and became quite a characterful element of the English Settlement album. And so this guitar is stereo wired. It's got
the stereo one.
Yes, it's got the Rico sound option, should you ever need it.
What does it do?
Well, it's basically it routes the pickup separately to two separate
sure
amps if you want that, and it came with a little pedal that you could stamp on to turn it from. I think it basically changed it from mono to stereo should you need it. I can't remember. I've never owned the actual pedal that goes with this. I've never used this. Always used the mono socket. And so we it just it literally chimed with our audience at the time.
Nice.
And
well played.
And did us no end of favours. And but again, I still hankered after the George Harrison 12-string, and I swore one day, I'd hang on to this guitar until I could find a proper one.
Right.
So help us out, Dave. Which model is that?
This is a 3/6. This is the modern, quote unquote, 360-12.
Yeah.
Which is what George's guitar was. It was a 360. That's actually based on the 330, which is the second grade down. It didn't have the deluxe appointments.
Yeah.
And they were imported into this country by Rose Morris, who were Rickenbacker's agents at the time. And they called it the model 1993 for whatever reason. And so that is basically, even though some people would refer to it as a 330/12, it's actually a 1993.
So that would have been the same body shape, 330
Exactly
and
the same.
360.
Yes, at the time.
I've got some reading to do.
That body shape disappeared after 1964 to be replaced by this one, which had the rounded corners and just a single binding on the back.
And the binding on the back, which had anyone done that before that, do you know?
I don't know at all, because originally the binding on the back would have had this checkerboard inlay, which I can show you on that guitar. They brought it back. We'll talk about that perhaps
Okay,
later.
we'll get onto that. It's fascinating.
But, they were, I think, because of mass production and everything, a lot of the fine details that made these things so special were, they cut corners too, and quality control probably was compromised slightly over time. But having said that, I took this guitar. I did the album English Settlement, and the following one, Mummer, which wasn't a very successful record. Didn't have any hits on it, but this guitar was still part of it. And I'm just trying to. This guitar, I have to say, isn't as nice to play as some of the others. I struggled with this, but it was a labour of love. You get some instruments, they can be they can be dogs, but you don't care because they just sound right and they look cool and they just slot with whatever it is you're doing at the time. And so I persevered with it and had a measure of success with it.
What do you think made it difficult to play?
I can't really tell you, other than most guitarists, I think, at the time anyway, gave up on Rickenbacker 12 strings for two reasons. Well, one main reason was they could never keep the bloody things in tune. And also, if you notice, the width at the nut is just the same as it would be on a 6-string guitar, and yet you've got 12 strings all fighting for space.
Yeah, right.
You can't get your fingers on the chords, and if they're out of tune as well, it's just too much like hard work for a lot of players. So they didn't become as popular as otherwise they might have been, had they just thought a bit more carefully about the practical difficulties of just fretting. You know, it's just, you have to. I've had some practice at it, so I've kind of got around it, but it wasn't easy. And also the setup, sometimes I know a lot of old Rickenbackers have to have the necks reset after time. I don't know what happened.
Because that's a lot of tension on that neck.
An awful lot of tension, and it's very skinny and fragile, and the top isn't that strong.
Right.
So quite often you'll see them, you know, this end, it gets dished in the middle, you know, and the neck will need to come off and be reset. Fortunately, that hasn't happened with this guitar too badly, but the action isn't low, it's fairly high off the fingerboard. So you have to be really determined. You need to want to play this thing if you're going to get any sound out of it.
Where the sound comes from.
Interesting, before English settlement, people hadn't heard 12-string on the radio for a long time. Certainly in the... what do you call it, the contemporary music. And
It's
so
like
you are credited with bringing back the sound of 12-string to popular music.
Well, was it me or was it Peter Buck from REM? Because I think REM were probably beat me to the punch on 12-string. I may be wrong. I can't be absolutely certain.
You were before that, weren't you?
We might have been, but the thing is, we weren't a world-famous band the way they were, you know?
Right.
So it's kind of a bit niche what we were doing. Certainly there were, at the time in Britain, we were at the tail end of punk. There wasn't a lot of melody in pop music. What there was, a lot of it was synthetic, you know, a lot of bands using synthesizers and tape loops and what have you. So guitar bands there weren't too many of them. And I mean, I guess it was the same, you know, with the Mellotron, with the following album, Mummer. I decided, well, we've got the 12-string guitar now. What else do we need? What else did I love from the 70s? The sound of the Mellotron. I wonder if we can find a Mellotron. We can't. If I could have found a Hammond organ and got it into my house, I'd have gone for a Hammond organ because people were getting rid of them. They were buying synthesizers. So again, I think we were one of the first of the new wave bands to actually start investigating vintage gear. Whereas, you know, a lot of the other bands were obsessed with, you know, the latest synths and all the artificial, what I could call artificial instruments.
What I find fascinating about that is, so you take this thing that sounds so iconic, and you guys know, if you've ever played a 12-string, the first thing you want to do is play Mr. Tambourine Man.
Of course.
And it's that. And yet, your output from that period doesn't sound in any way pastiche, it doesn't sound in any way rehashing the past. And yet, so were you always conscious of that? Were you consciously trying to avoid sounding like old stuff, even though you were influenced by it?
I would certainly say Andy Partridge definitely was against, at that time, anything rehashed. You know, he wasn't interested in rock and roll. He wasn't interested in any revivals. Because he's an original thinker, and he's very proud of the fact that everything he does has to be, you know, from him. It's his. As I was saying to Dan earlier, I had the luxury of having some of the best raw material to work with, and so the songs that he was writing, like, you know, Senses Working Overtime and Jason and the Argonauts, and All of a Sudden, they all lent themselves to this chiming Rickenbacker thing that I just lucked into, really. In fact, you know, that was back in the days when we really did work as a band, and everyone brought something individual to those songs that created the whole. But certainly Andy was not into reviving anything at all prior to the Dukes of Stratosphere. We can get onto that probably a bit later.
Can we just hear the opening chord all of a sudden, because it's something I play on the show quite a lot. I just want to say,
oh, do you?
It's this thing.
If I can remember it.
When I first heard that chord, that sequence, and it just blew my mind. And I sat down there working out. See, 12 string, I can't even play it. But that
F sharp 7 is what it is, Dan.
That's what I always played. Is that
yes,
wrong?
it probably was. Yeah. Do you know, I can't remember.
I'll
be honest with you, I cannot remember. Such a long time since I played.
That's such a great sound.
Are these guitars made out of the same stuff? Are they
Yes,
both maple?
they're all maple.
Are they?
Yes.
Because that one sounds kind of bassier. I don't know whether
Yes.
whether it's
Well, that's
where
the
I'm
pickup.
sat.
No, the pickup is. These are called high gain pickups.
Right.
And they started using these in 1969. They replaced the toaster. I gather the bosses at Rickenbacker never cared for the sound of the toaster, which seems extraordinary. They wanted something that was going to be, going to match the Gibson humbucker and had a more powerful output. So they went with these, which is a bigger winding. But for me, I don't know. It's fine. It is a very different sound, and it's still essentially Rickenbacker. But for me, I'll always want to hear the toasters. Yeah.
Was it? Sorry, bit of a tangent here. Roger Rossmeisl or somebody?
Yes.
Was he the Rickenbacker designer, or did he leave Rickenbacker and go somewhere else?
He went to Rickenbacker and he designed this.
Yeah.
This shape.
He was a car designer, right, or something?
Oh no. He was the son of a German luthier called. His name was Rossmeisl. I can't remember his Christian name. And he used to make these guitars under the brand name of Roger in Germany. And then Roger decided that he was going to, spread his wings and go to California where life was good and he could make a career as a guitar maker. And he got work at Rickenbacker and he designed this lovely what they call the cresting.
Cresting wave, yeah.
The cresting wave is actually this.
Of course.
That's the cresting wave. You see, and there's the crest of the wave. And he also had this thing called the German carve, which he actually took along to Fender, I think, later. But basically, it started at Rickenbacker.
Yeah.
The Rickenbacker 381, which is a hideous-looking thing, in my opinion, had this German carve around, same body shape as this, but it had this big sort of chamfer.
Kind of a chamfer all the way around the edge, isn't it? Yeah.
And but he was, quite a character, and I think the story of Roger Rossmeisl has still to be told in full because he's such an obscure character. He was just a backroom guy. He was basically a woodworker, and he designed a lot of these shapes, but was never fully got the recognition. And I think as time goes by, someone somewhere will unearth his story because it was quite colourful.
And write the book. Tony Bacon, if you're watching this, you've probably already written the book.
He may well be researching it as we speak.
So this is 1963?
That guitar is summer of 1964.
All right.
And you have to remember that at the time, if you wanted a Rickenbacker guitar, you had to order it and wait. They had a waiting list, I seem to recall. They were ridiculously expensive.
Right, wow.
That would have cost the original owner 220 guineas in 1964, which must be close to $5,000 in today's money, probably more.
Wow.
And you had to wait. You had to wait a long time. And the first batch that came over, basically what sold this thing was the Beatles movie A Hard Day's Night, because there's George with this fancy new shiny Rickenbacker and making this amazing sound, and the Beatles, as I say, were so big. Rose Morris ordered 25 of them, and that's one of the first 25. And
amazing.
And they arrived in August, I believe, '64. This ridiculous price tag, and they sold them all. And then there was a second batch in '65, which had a different tailpiece on it. It had an R. This thing, the branding, which is very pretty, but if you want to sew 12 strings into this thing, you need to set a day aside. It's just awful.
I love this. If you just tilt that towards the camera a sec, Dan. Are the strings in the same? They held in the same?
They're just little holes in that trapeze.
Yeah.
Just a hole, and the way I string it is I put one string goes from below and the other goes in from the top.
And out they come.
You have to be careful though, because I've broken no end of strings just stringing them up. You know, the little brass drum at the back comes pinging off.
Haven't I seen a picture of you?
Are you holding it?
I'm holding it. I've got it. I've got it.
Good. I just need to check that.
I've seen a picture of you with some other owners of the first batch. Is that right?
Yes.
You found them? Yeah.
Well, I know four of the original ones. Actually, no, 5.
Oh, that's amazing.
My friend Alan Rogan had one for a long time, which he sold a few years ago, and now I understand he has the one that Steve Howe used to play.
Oh wow!
And so we can account for 5. The other 2 were the notorious Kelly brothers, who wrote the amazing book about Fender's golden age.
Oh, them? Yeah.
They've got one each, and then I took this one around and we did a little photo session with Tony Bacon.
Yeah, no way. But for anyone who didn't follow that, Tony Bacon is a much published, awesome guitar historian and author. And if you've read a book on guitars at some point, chances are he either wrote it or contributed to it. And the Kelly brothers did the Golden Age, Fender the Golden Age.
What a fantastic book that is.
52 to 64 or something, is it? Something like that.
Whenever it was.
Yeah, beautiful book. So, yeah.
If we can pass these one along, and then perhaps we can.
This?
I'll grab this one because I'm really interested in talking about the solid body.
Oh yeah. Oh, this is mad.
Isn't it great?
Has this neck been reset, Dave?
It hasn't been reset, but the headstock's been repaired twice.
Yeah.
So it's on its third head.
Yeah.
Johnny Kincaid did that brilliant. Have a look on the back.
Johnny needs
because
a honk.
he replaced.
Oh, you're kidding.
From here, there's a splice there. If you look really careful, you can just see it.
The only reason you can see it is because you can see the lacquer. That's it. You can't see the wood.
You can't see the wood at all.
See the lacquer. Can you see that, Simon?
Where's the horn?
You can't see it in the wood. Let's give Johnny a honk.
Johnny.
Oh, man. Sorry.
It.
It's crazy, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
what is that, like 40 or 1 in points? 1 in how many? I always get my metrics, my imperials wrong.
Oh, I couldn't tell you. I'm still working in. Yes. What are you talking about? The width of the
nut.
The nut. It's probably about 1 5/8 or something.
That's what I was looking for.
I don't know. It's pretty narrow.
Yeah, it's no more than 42 mil. That's for sure. I mean, it actually feels narrower than a Strat neck.
Yes, it probably is.
It's the sound of ages, isn't it?
It's amazing.
You don't even have to plug it in.
Yeah.
It's just that it's there in that.
It's wonderfully resonant.
Yeah, it is.
Sorry.
So, when did Rickenbacker go to solid bodies?
They've been making solid bodies since the 50s.
Right.
They didn't start. Got to be careful now. Yes, they started with the Capris in the mid 50s, which I think is where Roger Rossmeisl came in. I may be wrong about that.
Yes, no, I think you're right. I think I've read that.
And I think he did the original. They started out with this odd sort of tulip-shaped single pickup little combo, they called it, wasn't it? The 450 and. I have to swat up on my Rickenbacker history, but I got a feeling that's where Roger came in. And the Hono bodies, they had a few attempts before they came up with that shape.
Right.
You know, they were slightly, the original 360s was a slightly thicker body, and it had a slightly different shaped horns on it, and didn't have the, I'm not sure if it had the binding or not. John Lennon, of course, is the big Rickenbacker salesman, because he had the little 3 pickup. Actually, no, it didn't look like this at all.
The 3/4 size.
The 3/4 size
Yeah,
thing.
right.
Oh, right, but didn't it had the cresting wave? Was it a 325 or is that before
320. It was a 325 with 3 pickups. Didn't have the cresting wave. It had 2 points,
that? God, it's mad what your memory does. Isn't
and it was a natural finish with a gold pick guard. And then he took it to Jim Burns, I believe, who sprayed it black.
Yeah.
That's the one. And then Rickenbacker saw this thing, and when they gave George his 12-string, they gave Lennon another 325 in black, which is the one he's most seen with, you know, with the white pick guard. Oh man, we're getting really.
You're getting deep. We're getting deep. So that's a.
Now this is interesting because Tom Petty and Mike Campbell went to Rickenbacker in the late 90s. They'd had this album, Damn the Torpedoes. Petty's on the cover holding this Fire Glow 12-string guitar, which was a one-off. They didn't know at the time it was a one-off. It was an experiment that Rickenbacker had done, somehow ended up in Mike Campbell's hands. And they liked this guitar a lot, and they said, why don't you reissue this guitar? But we want some changes made.
All right.
And the first thing you've got to change is this.
I'm looking at that, saying that's probably 44 mil or something,
Yes,
isn't
that was the most important thing. Expand the nut width so we can actually play the damn thing. And get rid of that R thing and put the trapeze back on so we can put the strings on in a hurry if we need to. And so in 1991, I think Rickenbacker went and made a limited edition of 1,000 Tom Petty signature 12 strings, which is this shape, and they did them either in Fire Glow or black or natural. I think I've seen some blue ones as well. They had this lovely checkerboard binding, which was something else I think Roger Rossmeisl might have introduced. It might have been his idea, which they dropped, as I say, in the mid-60s, when production totals, needed to be kept up. And so, so once the 1,000 run of Petties had been sold, Rickenbacker thought, this is going rather well. We'll put this out without Tom's signature on it, and we'll call it the 660-12. And it's a fine guitar. I have to say, it's a really, really... I always assumed that the hollow body was essential to the sound of the chiming sound of the Rickenbacker, but to be honest, this does the job every bit as well.
Maybe we could hear them side by side and have a little play and have a little listen.
Sounds like a Rickenbacker to me. It's just
sounds if it's in any way possible even chimier than this one.
I would say
sounds less full, maybe.
It may be that the strings are newer because I've been using this, and these guitars haven't been out of their cases for a couple of years.
Would you indulge us and
by all means
play that one just so we can kind of hear that?
Yeah. I'll set it up as it was.
It's tiny, isn't it? It's so mad because the body's tiny and the nuts the correct width.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
correct. It's a more usable,
more playable neck. Yes, indeed. Okay then.
Unless we may as well finish the trio and do this one as well then, just to. Sorry, this is a total indulgement. Tell you what we should do before the end of the video is try the stereo.
Okay, yeah, awesome.
If it's not too dusty in there. This is slightly brighter top end. I think possibly that has the richest low end. The
Right.
solid body probably has more weight in the low mids, but they still sound like Rickenbackers. You have to
Sound
be,
wonderful.
Really, by the time it's mixed in the track,
Yeah.
you're not really going to notice that much difference.
I noticed you playing with this fifth pot here, Dave. What does that do?
Yeah. No, well, that's the blender control, and what it is, it's a subtle way of. Yeah, let me see. Part of the sound of the early Rickenbackers was what a lot of guitarists refer to as the chiclet capacitor, and which was like a high-pass filter wired to this pickup, which made it sound a lot brighter and ringier. But because this one didn't have it, there was an imbalance between the two. So the thinking behind it was that you could balance the output of the two pickups without having to go to the main volume controls. I don't know, does it make a difference? I don't know. And I've wired this in reverse. Actually, the Rickenbacker, the way it comes from the factory is that it's all the way down for the full Monty. But because I like things. I've rewired.
It makes more sense that way.
It makes more sense that way. So when this pot is fully open, and there's quite a disparity in output between the two, but you can blend the two together. So you get a little bit of warmth from this pickup, just to bolster up the brightness of this one. So that's basically all it does. When the switch is in the middle, I tend to just leave this just a notch or two behind the maximum.
Yep.
Slightly over-engineered, I would say. But it's part of the Rickenbacker thing.
Awesome.
How was it? Just a quick reflection on travelling with them.
Well, yeah, they're okay. As I say, they don't. As long as you're careful stringing them up, they don't. They will stay in tune. You have to get the nut. Make sure the nut is properly cut. I had a problem with this guitar when I first got it. Yes, you just reminded me now, because I asked Johnny Kincaid to make a new nut for it, which he's done, so that the strings, move freely in the slots.
Sure.
If they start grabbing in the slots, you've got no chance at all, and you'll never get it in tune or get it to stay in tune. But because, of course, you're not bending strings, so there's not a lot of sideways pressure on the strings.
Yep.
So they'll generally stay put. If you get them sewn onto the pegs properly, they'll stay in tune. Fingers crossed. But just make sure that they're properly stretched when you put the strings on. They should stay put. Reasonably okay. And that's, as I said earlier, there's a lot of guitarists are put off by the fact that they're just too high maintenance tuning wise, and also having to fumble around down here just to get any kind of certainly with open strings to play. When you've got, say, playing a C chord or something like that, it does take a bit of work.
Blimey O'Reilly, one thing I just would like to mention as well, I've seen this in 1,000 pictures, having looked at many guitar magazine pages over the years, but if you look at the headstock there, the one set of tuning pegs points back and one points out, so that, I don't know about you, but whenever I've played a 12 string, I go to tune and I'm always tuning the wrong string.
Exactly.
But that just makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Look at that.
Yeah. But you still need to be sober when you're tuning, because it can be a bit confusing. There is a knack to that. But you're right. Fender 12-string guitar, it's like, is this the right one? And then you find you've just retuned something completely that was need tuning.
Too cool.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear the Danelectro. So we were at NAMM, and Danelectro have just brought out a new 12.
Yeah, so if you don't have... Because Rickenbacker doesn't make a cost-effective guitar. There's no Squire or Epiphone version of Rickenbacker, is there? They're a few £1,000, one would assume. So there are many budget 12s on the market. We saw this one at NAMM this year. Try and get the 5912, predictably enough. Big old. Let's see what. Can we see what you make of it, Dave?
Sure.
Being somewhat more experieused than us in this.
Well, I don't know. This is a brand new. I've never picked this.
Yeah,
up.
literally out of the box a couple of days ago.
Yes. Oh, it's got
Oh my
Mosrite
goodness
knobs
me,
on it.
this is
Look
so
at that.
much warm.
I had a go at tuning it. It means very little.
That's pretty damn good.
Not bad, is it?
It sounded really cool.
Actually, they've taken a it's like a Mosrite, isn't it? It's like a Mosrite pickup here, Mosrite knobs, and two Danelectro, what looked like
Lipsticks.
Lipstick jobs, yeah. It did,
Very
when it
nice.
was in humbucking mode, it was definitely throaty and powerful and all of that, wasn't it?
It was
sounded
very
less traditional, perhaps, but
So one thing,
cool.
one thing that you would do. So for those that don't know, Dave and I were in a band for like the last 10 years called Tin Spirits, and one thing that you would do a lot is, we know that sound, we know that the chimey 12-string sound, but you would use it driven and play solos and things with your 12, which is awesome. And it's a whole other world.
can we hear some pedalboard?
Yeah.
I
Let's
was
do that.
afraid
Let's do
you were
that.
going to
What,
say
Dave?
that.
Do you want this one? Or
Well,
or
let's
that
have
one?
the black one, because I think
This one?
at the time, you see, I was looking after a guitar for Steve Hogarth from Marillion. When I stopped touring with him in 2000 or whenever the last tour was.
Can you give him a honk, please?
Hello, Mr. H. He gave me this guitar to look after. And it was in my possession for 15, 16 years. He was so busy with the band that he never asked me for it back, and I looked after it. So when we put the band together, I thought, well, this is something we can use. It's a good sounding guitar. It's not just two guitars, bass and drums anymore. It's guitar, 12-string guitar, bass and drums. So I was, we'd done all these gigs, and I was taking it out and playing it. And then one day out of the blue, he emailed me and said, you still can I have my guitar back, please, Dave? No. So I said, yeah, of course, Steve, it's your guitar. I've no business playing it or even, doing what I'm doing with it. So, of course, it's your instrument. It's yours. So he took it back. So I thought, right, now what am I going to do? I didn't want to take the hollow bodies out because the volume we used to play at with Tin Spirits, it would have been kind of unusable because they would have fed back. Using distortion pedals and everything, that's not a good idea with the Rickenbacker.
Yeah.
Because they do have a tendency to howl. But I thought, I've got to get a solid body guitar. I wonder if I can find another petty. Well, the prices were just going through the roof of these because as a limited edition, they'd stopped making them and suddenly everybody wanted them.
Yeah,
that's the thing. When everything's out of production, everyone wants to know, regardless of how quickly they sold in the first place. So I started poking around on eBay, and within a few weeks, that came up, and no one seemed interested in it. I thought, well, it looks very, very nice. It's almost in brand new condition. I'll put my bid in, and lo and behold, nobody else was interested, so I won it. So I went up to London and collected it, and I thought, well, I'd be interested to see how it differs from the petty limited edition. The pickups aren't as hot, but it sounds nicer. In my opinion, it's got a better sound.
And I guess they vary from guitar to guitar. So they went back to the toaster for this.
Yeah.
One thing that's always fascinated me is the lacquered fingerboard.
Yes.
I mean, you don't normally see that on rosewood. Rosewood's
no, that's
normally
right.
left.
I think it's very pretty.
Yeah.
But when it comes to bending strings, you'd rather it wasn't there. But you're not going to do it on a 12-string, so this doesn't really matter. A lacquered board on a 12-string guitar is perfectly okay.
Just looks nice and shiny.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably the longest we've ever been on that pedal show without any distortion, so...
Yes. Well, that's the thing. It's not... you tend not to associate 12-string guitar with effects pedals. To me. I used to struggle with that. It was such a... Oh, man, it was really intense, wasn't it?
It was so intense. But it was that's from a song called And Go, and there's the solo that you play on that with the 12-string is awesome.
Forgetting where I was. It was just, because it was just such a big mess of sound. But, yeah, you're right. It was one of those happy accidents. I needed more power and volume. I happened to be playing 12-string guitar, and we just got this immense, big noise.
It was awesome. So good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe we can have a look at some other... we need to have a chat about the guitars you used in XTC, apart from the 12-string, because it would just be crazy of us not to do so.
All right.
Imagine if they were here, Dan.
Imagine. So if we start with drums and wires, and I think the Strat is a very big part of that album.
Okay, yeah. It's the one I used most on that record, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I have to put a blindfold on at this point. Because I fear
for
this is personal financial future.
This guitar is not... I mean, it's had a lot of work done to it over the years. But you know what? This is my lucky... I bought it in 1978 from a friend. It cost me £150. It still had the bridge cover, which I always put... Whenever I finish using it, I always put the cover back on for good luck. I always take it off before I play. Basically, the reason it was kind of affordable was the neck had a big lump in it. Somewhere around here, it had warped around the grain. And even though it was all factory and everything, there was no way I could straighten it out. Loosened the truss rod, nothing. So it was pretty good for playing slide and playing the kind of stuff that I did with XTC on that first record. So yeah, this is it. I had 3 guitars. I had the 335, which has another interesting story tell about it, and an SG standard that I've had for now 40 odd years that I forgot to bring. I didn't use it for very much.
Is
But
that the
this
guitar that we saw at Riffs that you lent to?
Yes, to Keneally.
To Mike Keneally.
Indeed,
Yes.
That's
Mike Keneally.
right. Mike Keneally.
Oh, sorry, Dave.
And so, yes, that's right. The SG was, I said, well, Mike, I've got a house full of guitars here, which, you're going to do this gig. And the guy just decided he'd like to play. He was over here on holiday, decided he'd like to play while he was here. And so I called my friend Andy Pett at Riffs Bar and asked him if he had a slot that my friend from Frank Zappa, he didn't know who Mike was. Oh, he played with Frank Zappa? Oh, wow, I think we probably sort something out for him. And God bless him, Andy got us a night at Riffs Bar. And, we put the word out on the web, and in less than a week, the place had been pretty much sold out. And so awesome. Mike didn't have any instruments with him. As I say, he'd just come over for a holiday, and I said, well, you can use my matchless amp. Which of these guitars would you like? And he just had a look around, and he said, oh, I like the look of that. He pointed to the SG, strapped it on, and he said, oh, yes, he says, this feels like home. And so he went out with a borrowed keyboard, my gear, that he'd never played before, and did a solo one-man show at Riffs Bar for 2 hours, wasn't it?
Oh, it was at least 2 hours. It was
ridiculous.
The whole crowd stood there, and everyone's mouth is sort of partially up and going, not quite believing what they're seeing. So he'll play a chord, and then he'll play piano, and then he'll do a solo, and singing and improvising. It is astonishing.
Yeah, it was.
The way that man's brain is wired musically, I've never seen anything like it.
No.
Unreal.
Yeah. And the music was pretty good as well.
Oh, amazing.
So where were we?
63 Strats.
1963 Stratocaster. Originally, this was in Sherwood Green Metallic when I bought it. That was the factory finish, which today would be worth a small fortune. But I thought it looked really ugly with the rosewood board. It just looked really drab. And I think the Sherwood Green looks great with the maple fingerboard.
Yeah.
But with the rosewood, it just looked really dull and uninspiring. So I said, right, I'm taking that off. We'll go hippie wood, natural. And so that's how it looked when I joined XTC. It was all antique violin, I think is how Mick Wareham described it when he did it for me. But it still had this bow in the neck. And it made it, and I took this out on the road on those early XTC tours, and it was my main guitar. And it fitted, the spiky music that Andy was writing and Colin as well. And served me well. And then in 1981, I was in a shop in New York City. They had some lovely, beautiful bird's eye maple necks that Phil Kubicki from Fender had made. He'd left Fender and started up on his own. And he'd done these beautifully figured maple necks. I thought that'd look great on my old Strat, and that would be a perfect replacement for the warpy neck. So this neck came off, went in the cupboard for 28 years, while the Kubicki neck stayed on, and I used it. I was quite happy with it. It actually improved the sound of the guitar. And so that stayed in the cupboard, as I say, for a long, long time. And I pulled it out one day and thought, this is worth money. There has to be a way of fixing this. I took it back to Johnny Kincaid.
Yeah, give Johnny another honk.
Yeah.
An aggressive honk.
And I said, you can see the problem, Johnny. What can you do about it? And he said, well, leave it with me. I think we might be able to find a way around this. But it will mean taking off the existing fingerboard, which by 1963 Fender were making their rosewood boards. It was just a thin veneer, and it just followed the contour of the board, and then the truss rod was slotted in underneath. So he said, what I can do is plane that off, plane the neck flat, and then I'll put a slab of rosewood on top, and we'll make a new fingerboard And I said, well, that sounds a bit drastic. I don't want to watch. You do it, as long as I don't have to watch. He said, fine. But God bless him, he did. He took all the little clay position markers out of the original fingerboard and numbered them. And these. So they all went back so that in the same position they were when he before he planed the board. And he found this gorgeous piece of Brazilian rosewood and made a flat slab like the ones that disappeared in '62, and put it on. And I think he must have had the guitar in his shop for about 9 months because I just kind of forgot about it. And he said, and one day he called up and said, your guitar's, your neck's ready, Dave. Do you want to come down and check it out? Put it on the guitar, and I was just astonished because not only is it a beautiful bit of the luthier's skill, and actually just getting this back to factory, but it also improved the sound of the guitar. I couldn't believe that just replacing a fingerboard, just a strip of wood, would have made so much difference.
Wow.
And because he's so passionate about what he does, you can tell the love that went into the work. Just, you wouldn't know if I hadn't pointed it out, I don't think, that wasn't a factory fingerboard.
Yeah.
I'd have asked you why it was a slab.
Yeah, you would have done, yes.
Just about, but it is
He's a national treasure, that man.
It is a lovely thing. It's a lovely thing.
Yeah. Not to hear that too often on new guitars. This is why we love the vintage stuff so much. It's just the bandwidth of the if that's the right word to use. It just seems so much more pronounced and just more musical. Musical is that's the word. And that's through the clean channel.
It's mad, isn't it? Because it's got brightness, but it's not shrill.
Yeah. Nothing
like
harsh
a lot of
about
modern
it.
guitars, to me, seem to have a very heavy brightness.
That's right. It's almost like this awful silver blade that sort of gets in the way of what you really want to be listening to. Yeah. No, that's it. I always found it's like all the Japanese guitars have that, and it's very frustrating because a lot of the woodworking and the finishing from Japanese instruments is really top notch. It's great stuff. They always let themselves down with the electronics, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But then, see, I've been spoilt by being lucky enough to have a pre-CBS Fender and used it all these years. So,
Do you still play it much, Dave?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
This is the one I go to if anyone wants a Strat. This is the one.
Yeah.
there's and I've got I think I've got about 5 or 6 Strats now, and they're all good. Even the Japanese ones, good, but they don't quite have it.
Yeah.
Have that.
One thing so when we first started playing, we had our Wednesday night rehearsal, religious. Like I think the first couple of years, we hardly missed a night. And every rehearsal, you would bring along another guitar. And at the end of the rehearsal, Dad would say, "Hey, Dan, have a go at this." And that's how I found the Flying V, and that's how I found my SG Junior.
Yeah.
But these guitars kept coming. There was like endless. But there was obviously you'd found this thing with these old guitars. And you found this early on, like before people were buying vintage guitars, you had identified this thing about these guitars that were made in a certain period of time. And like your Les Paul, which is a 54?
53.
53?
Yeah.
And you telling me the story about you buying that on tour in the States. And this, before these guitars were crazy popular. And what was it about when you play these vintage guitars? What did they have that you just weren't finding in the new shiny guitars?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure I can answer it. I just knew that I was attracted to them. Maybe from growing up and seeing bands with... Because, when I was at school, you couldn't afford to buy a Fender guitar. Nobody could. You just had to... If you got the opportunity to touch one, then you'd take it. I used to go into Jeff Kempster's shop in Swindon, and he'd be looking at us, us kids coming in. He didn't want us touching his guitars. They were hanging on the wall, and that's where they were staying. But occasionally, you might just get to lay hands on a Rickenbacker or a Fender guitar, and it would be just like, this is just, what is this? And you just dream of the day you could afford to put a deposit on one.
Right.
And I think it probably started from just dreaming about electric guitars as a child, and I also used to subscribe to Beat Instrumental magazine, which had all the ads every month, glossy ads for, impossibly expensive guitars that you didn't have a chance of ever owning. So they became sort of these iconic images of the unattainable. It's, guitar porn in its essence.
Right.
I think that probably... And it was just this notion of trying to, finally live the dream of my youth, of finally being able to lay hands and buy or acquire somehow these iconic images that I could only have dreamt about when I was growing up. I think that's a big part of it, the nostalgia thing.
Yeah.
And quite by accident, you realise that, as the more instruments you play, the vintage stuff was better made. It sounds better. It feels better. It looks better. And then you'd read, guitarists saying, well, the new CBS Fender guitars are rubbish. They're really expensive. They don't sound or, play like the old ones. And so you thought, well, could this be true? Because they're really expensive. They must be just as good. But in fact, they weren't. They were firewood, most of them. And it appalls me to see how much some of this stuff is fetching at auction now. Stuff from the 70s.
You're like a 76 Strat for $5,000.
No! Don't!
Yeah. I think it's important to say that not every single guitar made in that period was a dog.
Right.
But yeah.
They didn't
It wasn't
care.
quite the same thing.
CBS didn't care. They were only interested in sales figures. And if you read, Forrest White's autobiography or any of the respected guitar historians, they all tell this sorry tale of how the accountants took control. Because you have to remember, CBS was one of the biggest corporations in the States. They'd acquired this little company, and they were determined to cash in on the brand. That's all they cared about.
Okay, can we have a look at the your 335, because that's again another guitar. Another guitar that when I heard it was like blew my mind.
Oh, come on.
Now again, this is another Johnny Kincaid refinish, and I'll tell you why it was refinished. I was working at a parcel delivery company, and I had no. It's actually, how far back should I go with this story? I found this guitar. I'd always wanted a 335 like Eric Clapton's, with the cherry finish, block inlays, and stud tailpiece, and it was a question of finding one used. And so one day I'd saved up my money. It was just after Christmas of 77, 78, early month, January of 1978. I happened to be looking in the classified ads at the Melody Maker, and there was a used 335 for sale. And it was just about affordable. So I called the number and asked if I could go up and have a look at it. So I drove up the motorway after work to this little terraced house in Chiswick. And the guy showed me in, and, 'cause, you have to remember, CBS was one of the biggest corporations in the States. They said, right, here's the guitar, and he pulled it out. And I've never seen a more badly beaten musical instrument in my entire days. Honestly, it was just mashed. No pick guard, the knobs had gone. They had these modern little hat box knobs on, those awful things that Gibson made in the 70s. And there were scratches and dings all over it. It was completely beaten up. Worst of all, the headstock had been knocked off and someone had kind of bodged a repair. They put a peg in here and all the lacquer had gone from the back of the fingerboard. And I said, oh my God, this is, oh geez, I didn't know it was as bad as that. Well, you know, I thought, he said, well, do you want to plug it in? I said, well, I've come all this way, I might as well. Well, as soon as I heard it, that was it. It was sold.
Even in that state?
Even in that state, this is the best guitar I've ever played. And so he knocked a tenner off the price for the condition it was in. And I drove home with it, and I thought, you know, I'll hang on to this guitar for a while until I can find a cleaner one, and then I'll pass it on. But as time went by, prices of these things shot, you know, in the early 80s, when the vintage guitar thing started in around about 1980. From that point forward, everything, there was nothing affordable anymore vintage-wise, at least not by me.
Mm.
So I decided to persevere, and again I took it on to into the sessions for the first XTC, for the Drums and Wires album. And Andy and I both used this for most of the solos on that album.
Wow.
10 Feet Tall, Reel by Reel, which, you know, a lot of people seem to like. And we just, guitar solos weren't really part of why people bought XTC records, and they still aren't. But occasionally, Andy would allow us 8 bars in the middle of one of his songs. So you take advantage. I remember we just did, I think we did the solos for 10 Feet Tall and Reel by Reel in a couple of hours one afternoon. We plugged this guitar directly into the desk. Didn't use an amp.
Really?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure
Wow.
that's how we did it. But years went by. I decided I'd take it to Johnny and get the heads. This was in the summer of 1984, and I bumped into Hugh Cornwall from Stranglers down at Crescent Studios when we were working on an album called The Big Express. And Hugh dropped in to say hello. He's a nice fellow. And I know that this is how I got introduced to Johnny Kincaid. I said, you know, I've seen these Kincaid guitars, and I know they're based in Bristol, and what's your opinion of them? He was over the moon. He said, oh, you've got to go, and if you want anything done, go and see Johnny, he'll sort you out. He's a lovely fellow, and he's really, really talented. And that time, Johnny was still working with his brother, Simon. So I said, well, I've got this really beaten up old 335, and it needs a headstock. He said, just go and see Johnny, talk to Johnny about it. So I took the guitar to Johnny, and he and Simon, between them, made a brand new head for it. Again, lifted out the inlays from the original head. Still got the original head in the case over there. You see what a mess it was? I can show you.
Oh, I totally
I'm hanging
wanna
on
see
to it
that.
because he's got the serial number stamped on the back. But there you see, again, there's a splice there.
Yeah.
You can just about see
Scarf
it.
joint. Yeah.
He made new
Wow.
bindings, refretted it. So this is just great, Johnny, but the only problem now is that's a brand new neck on a beaten up old guitar. You're going to have to refinish the rest of the guitar. So I had an ES355, a 1963 55, which had a sort of watermelon cherry colour, which was slightly different from the 335 cherry. And I said, if you can match that, that would be fantastic. That would be my dream come true, which is what he did. So this is a kind of watermelony, slightly brighter cherry than the dark cherry you normally see on these guitars. And as time went by, I got some decent, the proper knobs for it, and replaced this. So I had a little coil tap switch there as well, which I had him replace. Oops, yeah, that's right. These are push-pull little Japanese pots. The poor guy had to resolder the.
That's a nightmare.
I wouldn't even attempt it.
Yeah.
He struggled. That's how difficult it is. So that's the story of how this guitar came to look the way it is today.
That's amazing.
Let us spin forward now to the year 2011. And Andy Partridge sent me an email, and he said with a YouTube link. And it was a band called Creation, who I remembered from the mid '60s, who were one of those bands that almost made it massive. You know, they were like sort of the Who. The Who light is probably being a bit unkind, but that's kind of what they did. They were a real freak beat, and they were very big in Germany. And he had a clip of them playing live on one of these German television shows. And Eddie Phillips was the guitar player, and he was the first guy to use a violin bow on the guitar. And he was into feedback and new sounds, and it was all very, it was proper big mod freak beat scene. And he was, he had this violin, that was his trademark, was the violin bow. That's where Jimmy Page got the idea for his theatrics with it. And so Andy had sent this link, and he said, "Isn't this your guitar?" And I'm thinking, yeah, it sounds like it. And then, because the Germans, they look after their film stock, don't they? They look after their history.
Right.
And they know how to film a band on stage. So, of course, as soon as Eddie pulls out this violin bow, it zooms in tight on the guitar, really tight. All the marks up here, all the scratches in perfect detail. And I realised...
That was that guitar?
I've just destroyed some British rock history. Thanks, Johnny Kincaid. It was my fault all along.
Wow.
So, anyway, that's where we are. This is Eddie Phillips of the Creation. This was his guitar, even though it no longer looks like it.
What a brilliant story.
So there you are. So I won't be able to cash in on it,
No.
but I'm not planning to sell it at any time soon, because it is a fantastic instrument.
The original pickups, presumably.
As far as I know,
Yeah.
here's the remnants of what Eddie or whoever it was destroyed the guitar, left behind. The tuning pegs are original. You can see the truss cover that got snapped off at some point. This was another trademark thing. See this pickup surround here?
Yeah.
It's something dropped on the pickup and forced the screw. It obviously received a lot of punishment. And you can see a mark on the pickup cover, which wherever hit the pickup, threw it down behind the surround. So he's got some glue and some araldite or whatever it was and repaired it. That's probably the most identifiable thing that proves beyond doubt its history. That's left on the guitar, that's visible, But anyway, it now has a loving owner, and not someone who's going to brutalise it with inappropriate bowing techniques.
Can we hear it? I'm fascinated.
So it sounds like that.
Can we hear it with some love?
Yeah, let's do that.
What is that? That sounds killer.
That's the
That's
dirty,
channel of
matchless.
matchless.
That's just the amp.
Yeah.
Just the amp and the Flint reverb.
Right.
Oh yes, yes.
That sounds nice.
Yeah.
What? Okay, you've got an old Big Muff on there and the double Dave.
Yeah.
Hello, David Dyke, if you're watching.
Yes,
Hi, David.
he's been very generous to all three of us.
Yes.
It's been very generous. This is my main fuzz unit, the Double Dave.
So David has these pedals made, and he sent them to us. Where are ours? Here's the that screen pedal and that muff pedal, and not only that, but he sent them to Danish Pete, Rubir Afro, and the Captain, all our friends, and Sir Dave Gregory.
I'm very grateful for that pedal because it's just, I think it's based on a fuzz face.
Right.
And it's got this octavider as well. So if you want to play the solo from Purple Haze, you just press the red button and off you go. But it's a really, really nice, smooth, very musical pedal. Do you want to? Should we?
Yeah.
Let's
Step on it.
have a listen.
Killer.
We hear
Nice.
the octave as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's of limited appeal, that, I think. Useful to have it there if you need it.
Sounds great. I'll tell you what, that when you were on the neck pickup in the fuzz side with that reverb, it was instant cream Clapton.
Yeah, it really is. That's kind of because one of the bands that I play with, Johnny Warman and his British Invaders, we do a whole bunch of 60s covers. But if I need Eric Clapton or Hendrix,
Yeah,
I just leave that as it is and step on it, and it's right there.
and that'll do it. What do you use the muff for?
Well, that's more vintage 60s sounding. I know it's a 70s thing. I bought that new in 1974, but it still sounds like,
year I was born.
a real, satisfaction. Listen to that.
Yes.
That's where it all started, isn't it, really?
That's awesome.
Pedals. Yeah. That's where it began. And Steve Winwood with it. All of that kind of stuff. It's vintage. That's what I call a fuzz box.
Yeah.
That was the kind of thing that, like Dave D. Dozy Beacon getting Titch with their Hold Tight. That was a big song when I was growing up. Just that, the football chant thing that. That's the stuff.
The DS1. Now I remember in rehearsal, I remember seeing the DS1 on your board, and I thought, surely not, surely not. And then you kicked it on, and I'm like, I have to now find an old DS1 because it's wonderful. So you use it in solos and things a lot.
I
from memory.
did, yeah. Now, the only problem I've got with the DS1 is that of all the pedals on this board, I can't get enough output.
Yeah, right.
Doesn't matter how I've set it up on
Yeah.
here, I can't get enough out of it. But it is a lovely sound. It's a nice, smooth, again, it's kind of woman tony. You've still got that nice attack. You know, it doesn't blur out. You can still. And it's, it works really great with P90 pickup.
Right.
That's fascinating because I think it's doing something with the top end of the matchless there, which makes it
Yeah.
kind of fuzzy.
Yeah.
I've never heard one sound like that before.
No.
Really?
That sounds killer.
Okay, I'll hang on to that then. I've always been happy with it. I've used it for most. To be honest, I kind of given up with when I joined XTC because rock pedals effects wasn't part of what Andy wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I'd more or less thrown them all away. And then one day we were mixing the Big Express, the album we made it in 1984, and the assistant engineer on the session was a guy called Phil Thornalley, who I'm still friendly with. In fact, I saw him last week. Phil, he had a little amp set up. I think he had one of Chris Spedding's amplifiers that had been left at the studio at Rack, and he had a few Boss pedals. I thought, oh, these look very pretty. I wonder if they do anything useful. And he had a DS1 and he had a compressor. I think it was a CS2 compressor and a little chorus effect. And they were affordable, about 40 or 50 quid each. And that kind of rekindled my interest, and Andy's as well. It was the compressor that we liked best because it took all the nasty brittle edges off the guitar and just made it more kind of easier to play. So we went down to the rock shop in Camden and bought a bunch of these things. And slowly, it was just every now and again it was useful to have them there. Particularly as the following Christmas we did the Dukes of Stratosphere 25 o'clock. So even though it was mostly vintage gear we were using, most of the distortion units were modern Boss pedals.
Right.
And the DS1, again, I've got it set up the way I like it, but it'll do a whole bunch more. You can get that muff sound out of it just by turning the treble all the way around. It's a very versatile overdrive fuzz thing, and I've used it for an awful lot of things over the years.
And the electro harmonics, let me refresh my memory, the Soul Food.
Soul Food.
So this is my Christmas present to Dave one year.
It was the best Christmas present anyone ever gave me, Dan. Thank you so much, because that's the most useful pedal on this board. At the moment I'm using a Car Rambler amp, which just has a single channel with a switchable pentode triode thing. But I use it on the pentode thing all the time. It's a big, clean, beautiful clean tubey sound, but you do sometimes need that little extra lift for the crunchy rock and roll stuff, and that's with that thing really just makes its presence felt. It's just a nice volume boost that doesn't get too dirty. You can still plenty of percussion there, and it just gives you a bit of edge and energy, and it's just fantastic. I wouldn't be without it. I couldn't actually do a gig without that Soul Food pedal.
Awesome.
And it's also the cheapest pedal.
There you go.
Oh, happy days. Can we hear it into the matchless just quickly?
That's the clean channel of the matchless. So you can see it really, it's just like having another channel, just a dirty channel, and it's not too painful when you switch it off. You go back to the clean, it's still, it doesn't feel alien.
Right.
It doesn't, you're quite comfortable switching to it and from it.
Very cool. have to mention the Dinosaurial, the compressor, the OTC
Yes.
201. So this is Dan Coggins, who also works with Thorpe now.
I've been really professional and not turned my phone off, guys. I can only apologise.
Was that the doink?
That was
we
the
heard?
doink. Yeah.
Okay. I'm impressed that we've only got one doink so far.
It's doinking is what it's doing.
I haven't turned my phone off either. I hope no one's calling.
It's alright, it's only Joey Landreth.
So Dan Coggins, who designed that, also was the Love Tone designer, and also now works with our mate Thorpe.
Thorpe, yes, he does.
And Thorpe,
Let's give Dan Coggins a honk, Dan.
Yes.
And Thorpe.
very good.
Good man.
And Thorpe made you this one, which was it's a copy of the
Burns Buzzaround.
Burns Buzzaround,
Oh, no
that's
way.
the one.
Yes.
And that's got a
And-
real unique
Oh,
thing
yes.
going on.
Yes, it has. Now, this is my introduction to Thorpe. I was poking around on eBay looking for a Buzzaround or a clone of it because, it's like I was kind of in the thrall of Robert Fripp. I have been for years and years because he does have a very personal, individual sound. I thought, yeah, it'd be lovely to get into that and just sort of mess, because I was now playing, as I still am to this day, with Big Train, who are progressive rock incarnate.
And I believe there's a new album coming out.
And there
isn't
is a new
Dave?
album coming out in May. It's called The Grand Tour, and everyone should have a copy. But anyway, on the road to the Grand Tour, I came across this particular pedal, and quite by accident, really, because I was poking around, and there's this guy who was based in Swindon, of all places, which is where I live, making pedals at home. And he said, I've made this, or at least the blurb said, well, I've got this, it's basically based on the design of the Burns Buzzaround, which was the fuzz box that made Robert Fripp so distinctive on those early Crimson albums. And so I thought, yeah, well, maybe it's worth a punt. I think it was about 100 quid. I thought it looked really well made, and he seemed to know what he was talking about. I'd never heard of this. I thought, who's Thorpe? Who can he be? In Swindon? No, it can't be. Anyway, this shows up, and sure enough, it's beautifully. I mean, we can't really pull it apart here. If you look at the work inside it,
Yeah,
it's
it's
beautifully,
wonderful. Yeah.
beautifully soldered and all point-to-point wiring. It was battery. It had a battery in it when I got it, and we've since, obviously you modded it for me, didn't you? It was you, Dan. Somebody modded it for me so I could put it in this board. It was certainly you. It was you. And I used it eventually for a solo. We play a song called Summer now with Tin Spirits, not Big Train. And I set this up on my landing at home because I was, struggling to get the sound that I was after. Through the pod, which is I know we don't mention pods on this show.
Oh, no,
But
it's
that's
okay.
you've
It's
used
okay.
the pod for years.
I'm still
you.
using it.
Wow.
And so, but for this particular solo, I decided I'd pull out the Fripp effect, and I don't know whether I've got it set up. It's something that needs, yes, I need to, it's just another overdrive pedal at this stage. It needs setting up really, Dan. But it is a beautiful
Sounds
sounding
great.
pedal, and it's it gets really, really wild. When you turn that sustain knob around, it does go a bit nuts.
Let's do that.
Okay. So it's a hairy little thing.
Brilliant.
Killer.
Okay.
There's one secret weapon we haven't exposed yet, Dan.
What's that?
That's the Rangemaster treble booster.
Oh, is it still? Where is it?
underneath?
It's hidden below in a different box that you made for me, Daniel. No, it was
No,
Pete,
this wasn't me.
Pete Goss made that, didn't he? Yes, Pete.
This has replaced the plosive.
Yes, it has.
Ah, okay.
And what it's fantastic for, especially when you're on stage with a prog rock outfit and you've got that big chord at the end of the 15-minute epic, and you just want to find that fifth harmonic for that extra, when the chord's ringing and you just want a little bit of, let's just see if I can find it. It'll do that. That's what I love about it.
Awesome.
I found the Rangemaster, actually a friend of mine called Terry Jackson found a Rangemaster treble booster for me when I was a teenager because I was a big Rory Gallagher fan.
Oh, okay.
Rory Gallagher and Taste, the first two
Taste,
albums.
yeah,
Did you
Taste
know Rory?
made.
Did you meet him?
No, never.
Oh, okay, we can't honk him.
He
I
was
never
my
met him.
hero. As a 17-year-old, I was completely taken up. Everything he did was just fantastic. I knew all he had was an AC30 and a treble master,
I think that would be a
treble
great name
booster.
for it.
Treble master.
Treble bastard, I thought was
Oh,
pretty good.
yeah, treble bastard. Yes, even better.
We're going to there's a registered trademark on that from this point forward.
That's it. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
ours.
By
We're
the
gonna
time
do
this
it.
show goes out, it'll be up.
Josh
So,
from JHS, if you're watching this.
So I was determined. I wanted to, I had the Stratocaster, I had the AC30. All that was missing from my Rory Gallagher kit, because I even had the lumberjack shirt and the jeans, was the Rangemaster treble booster. And we found one at Jeff Kempster's shop for I think it was only about £10.
Wow.
It wasn't a lot of money, and instantly, as
That was
rubbish as I was, I sounded just like Rory, and so. I couldn't play like him, but it didn't matter. I sounded like him. So that's been kind of in my arsenal, as it were, for a long, long time. And then I got it built into the fuzz box. In the 70s, I had Dave Luca wire it into my Big Muff. And, because I felt that the Muff didn't have enough, when I trod on it, the volume used to drop, I just used to blur out and I couldn't get enough lift. So with the Rangemaster in there as well, that kind of fixed that problem for a while. And then I lost the Muff for a few years, and eventually it came back from a friend of mine I'd loaned it to. And he said, well, you got something else in there, haven't you? What is it? And I said, well, that's my Rangemaster treble booster. Oh, I said, yeah, can you get it out? Because those things are worth a fortune now. I think it'd be something worth pursuing with. Anyway, I got the pedal back. He took the circuit out. It's only a little tiny little tag board, nothing in there at all.
Yeah, they're tiny.
It's a pot, a switch, and a tiny tag board, and a few resistors and a couple of capacitors.
Was that the original faceplate as well?
Put it
That's
in there.
well, it's kind of been That's what remains of the original faceplate.
Wow.
And so I got it put back into that little tin box, or I think he put it back in the tin box for me. And Dan wired it into my board, didn't you, Dan?
I did.
So it's nice to have it back.
On a personal note, biggest privilege of my musical life has been with hanging out with you and doing
It's been
that
a joy,
music.
Dan, and thank you for.
It's been
Without
epic.
you, I wouldn't have had my. You've rekindled my love of pedals because I'd kind of, poo-pooed them for many years. I was happy, I had a clean channel and dirty channel. That was near enough for me. But thanks to you, Dan, and your brilliant true bypass system, That's everything now is usable. It's perfectly, everything sounds great on stage. When I'm on stage, I don't have to worry about a damn thing apart from hitting the right pedal. The button, that's because my eyesight.
I've got something in common with Dave. Finally.
And so it's mutually beneficial arrangement.
Bless you.
And thank you so
buddy. No,
much.
you're so welcome. Okay, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Also, a massive thank you to our preferred retailers in the UK and Europe
And this is music of Guildford in Surrey.
and the US of A.
Would be Riff City Guitar of various locations.
And in Australia.
Would be Pedal Empire of Brisbane, Queensland.
Make sure you check out the description below where Mick does an amazing job of putting in the specific points of things that you might want to see in this
Won't
video.
be me for much longer. It'll be the new recruit.
Oh, yes,
Recruitment
yes.
is going well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. And finally, don't forget to check out thatpedalshowstore.com where you can grab photocopied plans of my stalking diagrams for Dave. Also, t-shirts and
File.
my mugshots. Hats and t-shirts and all that stuff. So again, thank you, Mr. Gregory. Have a great day, guys, and we'll see you soon. Cheers. Bye.